Last, we know who's going to compete in the NBA Finals with Bruce Marshall. I'm Brian Blessing here at Donbest.com. Let's get it rolling with San Antonio and Miami. Series commences on Thursday in South Florida. Miami's 5.5, 188.5 for Game 1. The movement, Bruce, though, is on the series price that opened $3 on the Heat, and there's been Spurs money all the way down to minus 235 and a takeback of plus 195 on San Antonio. A function of what the public last witnessed.
I think so, Brian, and I think it makes pretty good sense. I mean, Miami was pushed to the limit by an Indiana team that doesn't have all the elements and certainly doesn't have the bench that San Antonio has, and the Spurs couldn't have looked more impressive in their four-game sweep in the Western Conference Finals against Memphis. Now, the question here for the Spurs, they'll have had a 10-day break between games by the time Game 1 tips. Remember, the last time they had a break close to this, 8 days between the first series against the Lakers in the West Semi against Golden State. They really were flat in that early going of the Golden State series. So we'll see if San Antonio makes the adjustments. But I've noted that trend too, and I'm not surprised that the money is moving San Antonio's way.
It's funny. You do bring up that they were flat in the game with Golden State. But for an aging team, and just knowing that Popovich has 10 days to, and one would certainly anticipate, was spending 90% of his time preparing for Miami, they may have a little something cooking here.
Well, the matchups don't look too bad for San Antonio here. Certainly compared to Indiana, they've got a lot more bench than Indiana had. But much like Indiana, they do have the size that can bother the Heat. And you have to wonder about Miami here, having to go to the limit and go to the wall and call on LeBron to come up so big in that series against Indiana. Can they continue to do that? Is that recipe going to work against San Antonio? I'm not sure. Hey, if you put a guy like Tony Parker on Indiana's team, the Pacers probably win that series. Tony Parker plays on the Spurs, and I think that backcourt matchup is going to be a big problem here for Miami.
And we really don't have much to go on in terms of what happened between these two teams this year. There was the one game where Popovich basically left everybody back in San Antonio, and then Miami came in with a mash unit in the game in San Antonio.
Yeah, it was right at the end of March, right after the long win streak ended in Chicago. D. Wade, LeBron, and Chalmers all missed the game. March 31 in San Antonio. Ginobili missed that game as well for the Spurs. Incredibly, though, Miami ended up winning that game despite being minus those two big guys, 88-86. That was Chris Bosh's best game of the year.
And San Antonio almost won the game with nobody playing in Miami.
Right. With all those guys out, they pushed the Heat to the final minute, only lost by 5. So I don't think we can draw much from the regular season, especially since San Antonio, we knew the Spurs were always pointing to peak in the postseason. They have certainly done that.
As game time approaches, any anticipation where we'll see movement, side or total?
Side, I wouldn't be surprised if it came down a little bit towards San Antonio. I think that's the way the money is going to go until this series tips, and then we'll see what happens. Total, I think, is going to probably stay right around that range. I'm going to be curious to see this swell of support for the Spurs, which I think will gain some momentum as we approach Game 1.
So finally, we're going to get it rolling. The NBA Finals Thursday night, San Antonio and